This used to be one country, now it's 7, and what happened in between led to one of the deadliest conflicts in modern history, one that still shapes tensions today. What's strange about this is, this country was never supposed to break up. For decades it was a European superpower, and held together multiple cultures and religions. It was born out of the ashes of the First World War. After the collapse of empires like Austria-Hungary, the Allied powers redrew the map of Europe. In 1918, they supported the creation of a new country called the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, also referred to as the Versailles State, a country drawn by outsiders after World War I. After an invasion by Nazi Germany, Italy and Hungary in World War II, the Axis powers occupied it and split it up. Off the back of the war, on the 11th of November 1945, the country held parliamentary elections, but there was only one option on the ballot, the communist-led People's Front. Unsurprisingly, they won every single seat, taking full control of the new assembly. Just weeks later, on 29th of November, that same assembly officially abolished the monarchy and declared a new state, the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia. In 1946, the country was reshaped into a federal system, 6 republics, all held together under one government in Belgrade. But despite this structure, real power was tightly controlled by the Communist Party, with a strong central government. And while it recognised different nationalities, unity was enforced from the top down. However, Yugoslavia wasn't like the rest of the communist world. Even though it was a strict dictatorship, it carved out its own path, a third way, where people could travel to the west, enjoy a relatively high standard of living, and live between 2 rival worlds during the ongoing Cold War. Yugoslavia also received support from the west, including the United States, as it positioned itself between the 2 superpowers. And at the centre of this system was one man, Josip Broz Tito. Yugoslavia looked stable on the surface, but that stability had a name, and it was him. Tito wasn't just running the country, he was the country. Different nations, different religions, different histories, all held in place by one man. His message was simple: brotherhood and unity. It became the defining slogan of Yugoslavia. The idea was clear: forget the past, forget all rivalries, and move forward as one. And for a while it worked. Publicly, divisions were pushed aside, nationalism was suppressed, unity wasn't just encouraged, it was enforced. Behind the scenes, Tito didn't just promote unity, he carefully managed it. Political power was deliberately rotated between representatives of different republics and ethnic groups, preventing any one group from dominating the system. At the same time, outspoken nationalist leaders were kept in check, often removed from power or silenced before they could gain influence. This created a kind of control balance, where competing cultures were contained within the system rather than being allowed to compete openly. But that balance came at a cost. Yugoslavia became a kind of pressure cooker. On the outside, everything looked calm, even successful, but inside, the heat was rising, and as long as Tito was there, the lid stayed firmly shut. Then, everything changed, because the one thing holding it all together was gone. On May the 4th, 1980, Josip Broz Tito died. There was no clear successor, no single leader strong enough to replace him. Instead, power was handed to a rotating presidency, meant to keep balance between the republics. On paper, it looked stable, but in reality, it created a vacuum. Because Tito hadn't just been a president, he'd been the referee, the enforcer, the glue, and without him, the system he built started to weaken. What came next wasn't sudden, it had been building the entire time. The cracks started to show. Through the 1980s, the economy began to collapse. Hyperinflation took hold, jobs disappeared, and living standards dropped. What had once been presented as a successful third way was now struggling to hold together. By 1989, Yugoslavia's external debt was roughly $20 billion, and as the economy weakened, politics followed. To manage this massive debt, the government turned to the International Monetary Fund, but that help came with a heavy price: strict structural adjustments and brutal austerity measures. The brotherhood and unity that Tito enforced was replaced by a new, louder voice. In the late 1980s, Slobodan Milosevic rose to power in Serbia. He didn't speak of Yugoslav unity, he spoke of Serbian grievance. By using fiery, nationalist rhetoric and attempting to centralise all power in Belgrade, he sent a wave of fear through the other republics. Leaders in Slovenia and Croatia watched his rise and saw a dark future, one where they would be dominated by a single ethnic group. For them, the third way was over. The only way forward was out. Nationalism returned, first quietly, then openly. Leaders began appealing to their own ethnic groups, shifting away from unity and towards division. In 1991, the first break came. Slovenia declared independence, triggering the 10-day war. Despite it lasting only 10 days, Slovenia was just the beginning. Soon after, Croatia followed. This time, the conflict escalated. The Croatian War of Independence saw Croatian forces fighting against the Yugoslav People's Army, along with local Serbian militias who opposed independence. The war turned prolonged and violent, leaving roughly 20,000 people dead and displacing hundreds of thousands more. The next break would be far more intense. Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence in 1992, leading to the Bosnian War, the deadliest of them all. Around 100,000 people were killed, and over 2 million were forced away from their homes. Bosnia was the most diverse of the republics. In 1991, it was roughly 44% Bosniak, 31% Serb, and 17% Croat. This perhaps explains why the war there was the most intense of all. Around the same time, North Macedonia also broke away, but unlike the others, it did so relatively peacefully, avoiding large-scale conflict. By 1995, after years of brutal fighting and international pressure, the warring parties were brought to the table. The resulting Dayton Agreement finally silenced the guns in Bosnia. It didn't fix the underlying divisions, but it froze them in place, creating a complex government where power is shared between Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats to this day. It was a fragile peace, but the era of the Great Yugoslav Wars was finally over. After the wars of the 1990s, what remained of Yugoslavia was essentially just Serbia and Montenegro, which stayed together as a small federal union for a time. But even that didn't last. In 2006, Montenegro voted in a referendum to become independent, formally dissolving the union and leaving Serbia as a fully independent state on its own. A few years later, another major turning point came with Kosovo. In 2008, Kosovo declared independence from Serbia. However, its status remains highly contested. While many countries recognise it as independent, others do not, including Serbia. This has made Kosovo one of the most publicly sensitive and unresolved outcomes of Yugoslavia's breakup. Tensions between communities remain in parts of the region, especially in Kosovo and areas of northern Serbia, where political disputes can still flare up. While large-scale war has ended, the relationships between some of the countries are still shaped by history and unresolved disagreements, showing that the breakup of Yugoslavia didn't just redraw the borders, it left lasting divisions that are still being worked through today. Beneath the surface, Yugoslavia was never one single identity. It was a mix of groups with very different religious, cultural and historical backgrounds. Serbs were mainly Eastern Orthodox, Croats were Roman Catholic, and Bosniaks were predominantly Muslim. These weren't just beliefs, they shaped how people saw themselves, who they trusted, and where they felt they belonged. Even the alphabet differed in places, with some using Latin script and others Cyrillic. Over time, those differences became tied to politics, territory and power. This wasn't just a country breaking apart, it was a country that was never truly one to begin with. Tito had famously said, "I am the leader of a country which has 2 alphabets, 3 languages, 4 religions, 5 nationalities, 6 republics, surrounded by 7 neighbours, a country in which live 8 ethnic minorities." When he died, that delicate math simply stopped adding up, from 1 country to 7 separate states. If you would like to learn more about the changing borders around the world, please subscribe. Thanks for watching Mapped Out.